Okay, listen up, guys. Listen up. Listen up. In every football game, there'll be a time in the game when reverse steel strike. Something goes wrong, pull together, be one, be the team. Okay, and kick their ass. Kick their ass. Let's go.
Well, the Thundering Herd from Marshall University riding a 31-game winning streak heading into the season opener tonight against Southeast Missouri.
Hey, listen up, great half.
It's interesting to note that head coach Bob Pruitt himself played here back in the 60s, and he came back here to lead this team to heights that many thought were not possible. Hard to believe how far this team has come in the past 30 years.
A DC-9 Southern Airways plane carrying Marshall University's football team, rooters, and crew crashed and burned in moderate rain and fog in West Virginia. Once again, this late story just in, plane crash in West Virginia. That according to state police and the FAA.
Good evening. A charter jet carrying the Marshall University football team home to West Virginia crashed as it tried to land at the Huntington Airport. All 75 persons aboard were killed. It was the worst plane crash in the United States this year.
You know, once it went down, it was 30 seconds. They didn't have much time to do anything.
She just said, I just heard that this plane came in. She said, is that the one that Parker was on? And I was like, I knew that I just couldn't answer.
Here was these guys that I had lost, and then I started saying, you know, well, I should have been there. I should have died when they died.
No school in the country went through as big a tragedy as Marshall did.
That, as far as Marshall was concerned, was the dawning of the Marshall we have today.
No other team in football, college football, won more games than Marshall University throughout the 90s.
It's too good to be true. You know, you completely lose a football team and then you go and win a national championship. That can't be how it came about. It's the most unbelievable sports story never told.
Hi, I'm Steve Cyphers, and welcome to this ESPN Classic Sports Center flashback presentation. Think of Marshall University, and you think of Randy Moss, Chad Pennington, and a winning record. Hard to imagine, then, that in the late 60s, before it was known, the school brought in a group of players who could have put Marshall on the map much earlier. This is old Fairfield Stadium, where the Thundering Herd used to play. This is their story, and what remains the worst tragedy in the history of American sports.
I was in high school. My senior year was 1968. School was very small, but we had some very, very good athletes. I played high school football, I played baseball, and ran track. But football was my forte, so I was recruited heavily in football. I happened to make the All-Star game, and we were playing in Orlando. And some guy had asked me if I wanted to consider coming to Marshall. Well, to me, I'd never heard of Marshall. I had heard of West Virginia because all I could think of in West Virginia was hillbillies. And I said, and so when I told my friends that some guy had asked me if I wanted to make a visit to Marshall, he said, why do you want to go to visit those hillbillies? And I said, well, I don't know, but it's just somewhere different. I was born and raised in Quincy, Florida, in a rural area on a tobacco farm. There were generations that had come up just like they do in the slums of the cities now. People who get used to it, you stay there, and you don't ever leave because you don't ever see anything else. My grandmother would always say, you're not going to live on this farm. You're going to go to college, you're going to do something with your life, or you're going to go to the military. And I was convinced to come to Marshall at that time.
Marshall was going through something like a 27-game losing streak. And they had made a commitment they were going to get the program turned around. So they started a recruiting program that took them all across the country. There were players that came in from New Jersey, Texas, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, you name it. They were bringing them in.
My brother Teddy, he was recruited by every major college in the country. My mom and dad were kind of overwhelmed with the situation. We never heard of Marshall University until Coach Moss, Perry Moss, came to the house. He was, at the time, coaching in professional football. He specialized in quarterbacks, in which Teddy was a quarterback. My mom and dad felt very comfortable with Coach Moss, and Teddy selected Marshall.
Many people said he was the best athlete they had ever seen. He played almost any sport that you can think of, but he excelled in baseball and football, and they wanted him to come to Marshall. And I said, well, we have all kinds of universities wanting different players on the team because it was a championship team. And I said, I'm sure that he would go down there if some of his friends could go with him. So he went to Marshall.